Good morning. I'm Dr. Anoop. What brings you here today?
Hi, good morning. I'm Mr. Rahul. I'm not able to move my left hand and left leg since this morning. It feels like they're asleep.
Oh, okay. Can you please tell me your age, Mr. Rahul?
I'm 47 years old.
Okay, so when did you notice these symptoms? What were you doing then?
When I woke up from bed, I was feeling a little dizzy. Then I went to the bathroom. I couldn't bring my left hand to turn the tap off. I was almost falling from imbalance when I tried to walk away from the sink. I noticed that it was very difficult to walk, so I called my wife and kids and they helped me back into the bed.
I see. Were you able to talk properly?
No, I could only shout, making noises at first. Now I can talk, but you can see that my mouth keeps turning to the right side every time I try to talk. And I couldn't drink water properly also.
Did you find it difficult to swallow the water?
The water kept coming out of my mouth from the left side. None left in the mouth to swallow, but I could eat my breakfast properly.
Did you have any loss of consciousness or fits?
No, and I was conscious throughout.
Okay, that's good. Any issues with your vision?
No.
Have you noticed any tingling sensation in any part of your body? Or feel it's numb?
Not really. I feel fine.
Do you experience any pinpricking sensation?
No.
Do you recall having any fever or cough, cold, urine infection in the recent past?
No.
Are you able to control your bladder and bowel movements and wait till you are helped to the bathroom since all this happened?
Yes, I can walk to the bathroom myself. I need to drag my left foot, but I can walk for short distances. This morning I couldn't stand at all.
Have you noticed that the symptoms have improved slightly?
Yes, it all began around 5 a.m. in the morning. Until 7 a.m., I was mostly in the bed. Then I could walk myself to the front door. Now we traveled for almost 2 hours before coming in.
Oh, okay. Have you been a smoker?
Yes, I smoke about 5 cigarettes daily.
Okay. What about alcohol?
No, I don't drink. Never have.
Are you on treatment for any other condition, like blood pressure or diabetes?
Yes, I take medicines for blood pressure for almost 7 years now. Daily, 1 tablet.
Can you tell me the name of the tablet?
8 and 50.
Any time in the past you had symptoms like these?
No, this is the first time.
I wish you had come in earlier, Mr. Rahul, as soon as the symptoms began. I'll go ahead and do a quick examination and then we can get you started on treatment.
You've just heard an interaction between a patient and his doctor. Let me summarize all that you've heard. A 47-year-old male who's a hypertensive and a smoker presents with acute onset of weakness of his left side of his body. He says that he had difficulty walking to his bed and that he required help from his wife and his children to get to his bed. He also complains of slurring of speech and dribbling of water from the left side of his mouth when he attempted to drink water. There's no history of loss of consciousness, no history of tingling or numbness. There's no history of bowel or bladder problems. There's no history of seizures. At the time of evaluation, the symptoms had improved marginally. Now, the diagnosis in a patient with a neurological problem is almost invariably made by the end of history. However, a good examination is required to corroborate your diagnosis. A neurological examination needs to be systematic and sequential and well organized. All examination should begin with a detailed general physical examination. Today we're going to start off examining this patient, keeping in mind that the patient has a neurological problem. After making sure that the patient is conscious, alert, comfortable and cooperative, we go on to examine the pulse, blood pressure, temperature and the respiratory rate. Sometimes we may get clues to the diagnosis just on the basis of this vital examination. For example, a patient with an irregular pulse may be having atrial fibrillation. And we know that in a patient who has atrial fibrillation, there's a high chance of a thromboembolic stroke. A patient who has high blood pressure is at risk of developing an ischemic stroke or a hemorrhagic stroke. The pattern of respiration may point to the extent of neurological system damage. Patients with agonal breathing or agonal gasps may be having extensive brainstem injury. Patients with shallow, slow breathing may be having a metabolic encephalopathy. I'm going to start talking about how we look at pallor. Pallor is looked at in the palpebral conjunctiva and the mucosa of the oral system, oral cavity. Pallor may be because of B12 deficiency, which causes both anemia as well as neurological system dysfunction. Icterus is the yellowish discoloration of the skin, mucous membranes, and the sclera. Again, patients with hepatic encephalopathy, or in patients who have Wilson's disease, wherein both the brain and the liver may be affected. Cyanosis is the bluish discoloration of the skin and the mucous membranes, seen typically in the oral mucosa as well as the nail beds. Clubbing is the terminal enlargement of the fingers and toes. Although most causes of clubbing are because of respiratory and cardiovascular problems, rarely clubbing can happen in conditions such as syringomyelia. Lymphadenopathy refers to a tender enlarged lymph nodes that may be an indicator of disseminated tuberculosis, which may involve the brain or the meninges. Patients may have lymphoma, or even it may be an indicator of metastatic malignant disease. Edema refers to the collection of fluid in the subcutaneous tissue. This is seen in the dependent portions of the body, namely at the ankles and at the sacral level, especially in patients who are bedridden. Koilonychia refers to the spoon-shaped nails seen in patients who have iron deficiency anemia. It is important that we pay attention to the skin because there are certain neurocutaneous markers that are useful in helping us make a diagnosis. Some of the neurocutaneous markers that we look for are the cafe au lait spots. These are brownish macules that are seen on the trunk. This may indicate underlying neurofibromatosis. The presence of red papules around the side of the nose and the cheeks point to the presence of what is known as adenoma sebaceum, which is a marker of a rare genetic problem called tuberous sclerosis. It is also vital to look for thickened nerves, which may be seen in leprosy and certain hereditary polyneuropathies. The nerves that we are going to examine are the supratrochlear and the supraorbital nerves on the forehead, the greater auricular nerve as it winds its way down along the sternocleidomastoid muscle, the ulnar nerve, which is the most commonly thickened nerve, and the common peroneal nerve as it rolls over the head of the fibula. We also need to pay attention to the posture of the patient, whether a particular limb is externally rotated or if a particular limb is flexed, which may be seen in patients who have hemiplegia. We also need to look for any involuntary movements involving the head and body. No examination is complete without examining the neck. It is important to pay attention to any thyroid swelling. Patients who have severe thyrotoxicosis often present with muscle weakness. On the other hand, patients may present with ataxia secondary to severe hypothyroidism. We also have to look for neck stiffness, which is a manifestation of meningeal irritation, which may be seen in conditions like subarachnoid hemorrhage and meningitis. Now I'm going to demonstrate all that we have discussed. Hello, I'm Dr. Anup. Today I'm going to be doing examination for demonstration purposes. I hope you're comfortable.
Yes, doctor.
I'm going to be looking at your head and neck. If there's at any point of time you're uncomfortable, please let me know.
Yes.
All right. We have already examined the pulse, blood pressure, the respiratory rate, and temperature. Now we're going to look for pallor. Please look up. Please look down at my hands. Can you open your mouth and show me your tongue? Can you lift up your tongue? We look for icterus under the tongue surface. Can you please show me your hands? We look for clubbing at the terminal ends of the fingers. We can also look for cyanosis at the nail beds. Now we are going to look for lymph nodes. This is the way to look for axillary lymph nodes, by placing the person's hand on your examining hand and looking for nodes in the axillary area. We look for edema by pressing over the ankles. We need to look for deformities of the spine as well. Can I lift your shirt, please? Now I'm going to look for thickened nerves. Can you turn your face towards me? I'm looking for the greater auricular nerve as it passes over the sternocleidomastoid. Please note that both sides should be compared. I'm looking for the ulnar nerve which passes below the medial epicondyle. Now I will look for the common peroneal nerve as it winds its way over the head of the fibula. I will be looking for thyroid enlargement. Can you swallow? Okay. Can you put your legs up? The thyroid gland needs to be examined with you standing behind the patient. I'm going to be putting my hands on your neck. If there's any discomfort, please let me know. Look for enlargement of the both lobes of the thyroid. Now I'm going to demonstrate looking for neck stiffness. Can you please lie down with your foot here? Relax. I'm going to lift your neck. Please don't attempt to do anything. Just relax. Okay. As you can see, the person was able to flex his neck and touch his chin almost up to his chest. That means there is no neck stiffness. Now coming to the examination of the neurological system proper. We are going to divide this into 4 parts. Examination of the higher mental functions, followed by examination of the cranial nerves. Then we are going to talk about examination of the motor system, followed by examination of the sensory system. The higher mental functions are discussed under the following headings. We're going to look at the level of consciousness, the appearance, behavior, and mood of the patient. We're going to be assessing the intelligence, the memory, and we are also going to be looking at whether the patient is oriented to time, place, and person. This is going to be followed by assessment of speech and language. And lastly, we're going to look for the presence of release reflexes. Consciousness refers to an awareness of one's own self and environment around you. There are varying levels of consciousness. Alterations in consciousness may take the form of drowsiness, wherein a patient may be aroused by a simple stimuli. On the other hand, patient may be stuporous, which may require a stronger stimulus to wake the patient. And lastly, patient may be even comatose, wherein the patient does not respond to any sort of stimuli. Other forms of alterations in consciousness may take the form of catatonia, wherein the person attains a rigid posture of his limbs which may be maintained for several hours. This is seen in conditions like acute psychotic disorders, for example, in schizophrenia. Akinetic mutism refers to a situation where the patient is completely immobile, does not make any sound, and can only perform certain eye movements. This happens because of extensive damage to bilateral frontal lobes. Delirium refers to the presence of an acute confusional state with impairment of global functions. This may worsen as the day progresses. Delirium is an acute confusional state that occurs because of a toxic, metabolic, or an infective process. It is characterized by the following features: impairment in consciousness, which may worsen as the day progresses, memory changes, psychomotor changes, and even emotional changes. General appearance, mood, and behavior of the patient can sometimes be made of during the interaction with the patient when you're taking a history. You should make a note on how the patient is dressed, whether the patient appears withdrawn, apathetic, or does he appear aggressive or elated, which may suggest mania. To test intelligence, reasoning, or problem solving, we start off by asking simple arithmetical problems. For example, asking the patient what 1 plus 2 is equal to. Depending on the patient's educational status, we may ask more complex mathematical queries. For example, we may ask the patient to subtract 7 from 100 and thereby ask serial subtraction. Alternatively, you could ask the patient of a meaning of a commonly heard proverb. For example, you may ask the patient what it means when you say, "All that glitters is not gold," or, for example, "A stitch in time saves 9." A patient's memory can be tested by looking for immediate memory, recent memory, and remote memory. We can ask the patient a set of numbers, a 5 or 6 digit number, and ask the patient to immediately repeat it after you have said those numbers. This tests immediate memory. Remote memory can be tested by asking the patient where he or she went to school or where she studied in college. You can ask for recent memory by asking what the patient had for breakfast. You can assess for orientation to time, place, and person by asking the patient as to where he is currently. You can also ask for anybody around the patient that the patient is familiar with. And you can ask the patient what time it is approximately without looking at the watch or clock. Finally, we ask for the presence of delusions or hallucinations. Delusions refers to a fixed false belief despite providing evidence to the contrary. For example, a patient may be adamant and say that he is the Prime Minister of India. Hallucinations refers to a perception of sensation in the absence of an external stimuli. For example, a patient may say that he sees snakes crawling over the wall. Speech and language can be assessed by paying attention to the following components of speech and language, which are comprehension, repetition, naming, reading and writing, and word output or spoken speech or spontaneous speech. Comprehension refers to the patient's ability to understand a conversation. You can assess comprehension by asking a simple yes or no question. For example, you can ask the patient, "Can a dog fly?" Repetition can be assessed by asking the patient to repeat either small words or short sentences. For example, you may ask the patient to repeat no, ifs, ands, or buts. Naming can be assessed by asking the patient to name a simple object, for example, a pen. You can assess reading and writing by asking the patient to read a sentence aloud and follow what the sentence means. Difficulty in reading is called alexia, whereas difficulty in writing is called agraphia. Word output or spoken speech can be assessed by simply talking to the patient and looking for fluency or whether the speech is non-fluent. Fluency refers to normal word output which is normal in volume, phrase length, and melody, whereas non-fluent speech is halting and sparse. Aphasia or dysphasia refers to disorders in language. Language comprises the components that we have just discussed, whereas dysarthria refers to problems with articulation or enunciation of speech. We're going to discuss some common types of aphasia. Sensory aphasia occurs because of a lesion at the Wernicke's area. This is located at the end of the perisylvian fissure, at the junction between the temporal and the parietal lobes. A lesion in the Wernicke's area will result in patient having fluent aphasia but impaired comprehension. In patients with motor aphasia, the lesion lies at the Broca's area, which is located at the frontal lobe. In patients with Broca's aphasia, comprehension is intact, but the speech is non-fluent. They speak haltingly and have sparse output. In conduction aphasia, the lesion lies in the connection between the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area. This tract of nerve fibers is called the arcuate fasciculus. In this kind of patient, comprehension is intact, fluency is okay, but repetition is impaired. And the last type of aphasia is global aphasia, wherein all components of speech and language are impaired. We spoke about dysarthria being a problem with articulation or enunciation of speech. There are 4 types of dysarthrias. Cerebellar dysarthria occurs because of a cerebellar problem. In this, a patient will scan each syllable of a word. For example, he might say cerebellar as cerebellar. This is called a scanning type of speech, typical of cerebellar dysarthria. Patient may have pseudobulbar dysarthria, where the lesion lies in the bilateral corticobulbar tracts. In this, the person's speech is strained. He may pronounce constitution as constitution, where the speech is strained. Bulbar dysarthria is checked by looking at whether the patient is able to pronounce the lingual, labial, and the palatal syllables. We ask the patient to say pa, pa to look for the labial muscles. We ask the patient to say la to look for the lingual components, and to say ga to look for the palatal components. The last type of dysarthria is cortical dysarthria, also sometimes referred to as hypokinetic dysarthria. In this, the patient has hesitancy in word production, seen typically in lesions involving the basal ganglia, for example, in patients having Parkinson's disease. Lastly, we are going to be examining what are known as release reflexes. These reflexes are seen in infancy, but as the person grows older, these reflexes disappear, only to reappear if there is extensive damage of the bilateral frontal lobes. The first reflex that we are going to discuss is the glabellar tap, wherein on tapping the glabella, the patient will blink. If the patient continues to blink, this is an abnormal response. The patient may have what is known as a grasp reflex. If you stroke the patient's palm, the patient will grasp your finger. The third type of reflex is the pout reflex. On tapping the lip, there will be a pouting of the lips. And lastly is the palmomental reflex. On stroking the palm, you will notice a contraction of the mentalis muscle. These reflexes, which are otherwise absent in a normal person, will re-emerge in patients who have involvement of bilateral frontal lobes. Now let's go on to demonstrate all the things that we have learned under higher mental functions. As you can see, our patient is conscious, he's alert, he's cooperative. On appearance, he appears to be well dressed. In my conversation with this patient, he did not appear to be unusually elated, he did not appear apathetic. I'm going to ask you a few questions. These are simple tests, simple mathematical problems. What is 2 plus 3?
5.
Can you subtract 7 from 100?
7 from 100 is 93.
93 minus 7?
93 minus 7, 86.
86 minus 7?
79.
79 minus 7?
72.
As you can see, the patient was able to perform complex arithmetical problems. You can also assess his reasoning or problem solving by asking a simple proverb. Do you understand the proverb, "A stitch in time saves 9"?
Yeah, if we do things properly, then we don't have to waste time later on.
Okay, good. Now I'm going to assess some tests. I'm going to do some tests regarding your memory. I'm going to say a few numbers and you have to repeat them after me. 65432,
65432,
274931.
274931.
Very good. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had oats
Where did you do your schooling?
in Mumbai.
Good. We have just assessed his immediate memory, his recent memory, and his remote memory. Now we are going to assess orientation to time, place, and person. Can you tell me approximately what time it is now without looking at your watch?
It should be approximately 9:30.
Okay. Do you know what place this is?
This is Mumbai.
Good. Who did you come with when you came to this place?
Arrived with my uncle.
Good. So we have just checked orientation to time, place, and person. Now we're going to demonstrate how we look for speech and language. If you remember, we assessed the components of speech and language. We assessed for comprehension, which is the ability of the patient to follow a conversation. I'm going to ask this patient a simple question. Do dogs bark?
Yes.
I'm going to assess naming. What is this?
It's a pen.
Good. Now we're going to assess reading and writing. I'm going to give the patient a sentence which he has to follow and perform. Thereafter, I'm going to ask him to write his address down. By this, we will be assessing his reading and writing skills. Now, I'm going to give this paper which has a statement written on it. I need you to follow it. Okay?
Lift your right hand.
Good. Can you write down your address? Good. Can you repeat after me? Mumbai is a city in Maharashtra.
Mumbai is a city in Maharashtra.
Good. We have just assessed the components of speech and language. Now we are going to assess the release reflexes. Show me your hands. To assess for grasp reflex, I am going to stroke the patient's palm. An abnormal reflex would be the patient grasping my fingers. The glabellar tap involves tapping the patient's glabella and looking for the response. An abnormal response would be continuous blinking of the patient's eye with repeated glabellar tap. Show me your hands. Now we're going to demonstrate palmomental reflex. I'm stroking the patient's palm to look for a contraction at the patient's mentalis muscle on his mouth. An abnormal response would be when I strike or rub the patient's palm, there will be abnormal contraction of the mentalis muscle around the patient's mouth, which is not present here. The pout reflex is demonstrated by tapping the patient's lip with a knee hammer. An abnormal response would be pouting of the patient's lip on tapping his lip with the knee hammer, which is not present here.